Hello and good evening, our dear community of PWN Romania. I'm very happy to have this meeting today with a very special guest that I invited to talk to us and to the community. I'm inviting here Mr. Srini Pillay, which is a Harvard trained psychiatrist. Hello, Srini, and I would say about you in a few seconds. And I'm very happy that you accepted our invitation in our community.
Thanks so much, Alina. It's lovely to be here. And I think it's such an important topic to be
It
able to
is.
think about mindset in this way and to be able to think about, especially with all of the difficulties that are going on in the world, how do we manage our own minds and how do we stay focused on our careers and how do we advance so that we can help people in the particular jobs that we're involved with.
Yes, because our mission in PWN Romania is actually to help and to empower women to advance in leadership position. And we try to find different topics for them to be able to maybe set some different mindset, actually, if they are not in the right mindset, or to find out how they can move forward in their career in order to achieve their goals, actually. So I didn't find anybody better than you to talk about this idea from the brain science point of view. So actually, this is why we are here to talk about women in leadership and in top positions from this brain science angle, because as I said, you are a trained psychiatrist, and you are actually, when I read about your bio, I also saw that you are a pioneer in a field that you called leadership neuro coaching. And I like the pioneers, so actually we are very on topic with this. And you also wrote some books. A few of them are actually awarded, and I will just nominate Life Unlocked, the 7 revolutionary lessons to overcome fear. And hopefully we will talk about fear in our discussion. So let's start our discussion about how to empower women in order for them to be able to exceed in a leadership position. And actually, we will start directly on the topic because we don't have a lot of time. What I would like to say before my first question is to invite the women, and actually also men if they are watching us, to put questions. We will see the questions in the live, and we will try to answer to each and every of them due to our live intervention. So I would like to talk to you about actually what normally or not normally, I don't know, holds women back in general in owning their own power. Because this, I think, and I would like also for you, if you can, say if there is a difference between the same topic in women and for men to own their power. What holds them back?
So a couple of different things come to mind. I think it's different for different women. So I think not all women are the same. So I think the first is just the stereotypes and the habits in thinking that women have become used to, and we can go into detail about that. Secondly, some of the fears and anxieties that actually keep them from reaching their full potential. And I think thirdly, just a lot of people are not oriented towards possibilities. And as a result, they cannot navigate to the level of success that they need to navigate to. Now, as you pointed out, all of these things apply to both men and women. And as a fourth thing, I would say that one of the things that can hold women back is if they overly identify with their gender rather than their capacities. Because if the gender comes with a stereotype, then you're always approaching the world as a disempowered person. Whereas if you are connected to your capacity and you lead with that, and you happen to be a woman, that's a very different way of approaching the world. So I think that the stereotype, the fear, and possibility are three factors that we could look at to try to understand this better.
Okay. That's an interesting perspective, and I think it's important for us to take them step by step to go a bit deeper in the situation, to understand also how can we overcome at some point if we understand what's holding us back, we can do some actions and overcome them. So let's take them step by step if we can.
Sure. So if we take if we look first at the notion of fear, and I just want to point out that I don't see you on my screen, which is fine as long as that's fine on your end.
No, it's okay. It's okay. When you are talking, you are the on front, and then when we talk together, actually we are both. So it's okay. We are like on the TV.
Okay. So yeah, in terms of stereotype, if someone has told you over and over again that you cannot succeed at the level at which men can, or you cannot succeed because you have too many things going on for you, then you begin to believe that at some fundamental level. Studies have shown, for example, that if historically people would say girls are not good at mathematics, and as a result, in many studies, girls didn't do well at mathematics. But then they did a study where they actually told a certain subpopulation of girls, "You're really good at this." And once they believed that they were good at it, they performed as well as anyone else. So if you believe in the habit of stereotype that you are a woman and as a result you will be disempowered and so you will never get somewhere, then you will act through that stereotype. For example, in aging stereotypes, we know that when people are primed with their age and they're older, if they think about their age, they'll actually start moving slower, even if it's not conscious. So unconscious stereotypes can limit progress. And one of the things we know is that the second factor, stress and anxiety, is something that can turn on habit circuits in the brain. So when you're stressed or anxious, your brain is at risk of going back to the stereotype that you're disempowered, that you can't really make it, that it's going to be an uphill challenge. And as a result, a lot of women don't really want to take that on.
Okay. You also said about the lack of possibility. Is that also a pattern in our thinking?
Very much so. So, when it comes to possibility thinking is about believing that you can get somewhere. So, for any woman who's listening to this, or any man as well, anyone who's listening to this, possibility thinking is about setting your bar really high. So, for example, say you want a board position and you're fairly senior, but there's a big gap between where you are and where you want to be. Possibility thinking, you let the future use you, meaning you think about, okay, I'm a woman who sits on a board. What do I need to do differently to honor that? And rather than looking at the external world, you let your own possibility guide you toward that goal. Now, the problem with possibility thinking is that there are several things that can prevent that. And when you do have possibility thinking, when you have belief, one of the things you have is an increase in dopamine, so you feel really rewarded. And you also have a decrease in stress levels. You have an increase in natural opioids that your brain produces, so you feel more relaxed. For example, I'll tell you a study that I think is interesting. When
Yes,
when
please.
they looked at a study where they gave everybody a neutral paste, but on one they labeled it lidocaine for pain relief, and the second one they labeled it capsaicin, the active ingredient in chili, and the third they labeled neutral, but they were all the same. What they found in the study was that when people saw lidocaine for pain relief, they were like, "Oh, this is going to be really relieving," and the reward center in the brain started to light up. When they saw capsaicin, they were like, "Oh, this is going to really sting me," and when you look in the brain, the pain center started to light up. And you look at the neutral, people were like, "Well, it's just neutral. Nothing's going to happen." So
Yeah,
nothing
nothing.
happened, which means if you expect the worst, your brain is going to operate in that way. If you expect your greatest possibility, then your brain's going to construct a plan to fulfill that possibility. So, what blocks possibility thinking? And there are a number of different things. The first is burnout. When you're burnt out, if you say to someone who's burnt out, "I want you to feel really motivated," they'll look at you like you're crazy. Like, I just want to get through the day. I don't want to feel that motivated. So,
Yeah,
burnout
true.
can really stand in the way of possibility. The second thing is feeling lost. In our current environment, it's so hard to know what's going to happen the next day. Is there a war? Is there a virus? What's happening with inflation? Is there what's happening in the supply chain? There's a lot of different questions. So when you're feeling lost, You don't really know what to do, and that can block your sense of possibility. The third thing is when you feel like you're stuck in habit. So if you're just doing things the way you usually do them, it's very hard to then believe in possibility. In fact, there's a study by Campbell and colleagues published in Harvard Business Review that's called "Why Good Leaders Make Bad Decisions," and
Yeah, I
the
know it. Yeah.
and the number one reason is habits, emotional
Mhm.
tagging, and pattern recognition. Because when you're good at what you do, you rely on your habits. But if you're trying to advance, those habits can hold you back. The fourth factor is already giving up. So some people have already just given up. They've just given up on the world. They've given up on the work situation. And when you do that, you're not in the mood to think of possibilities. The fifth thing is anxiety or depression or just having a down day. When you're feeling down and you're not refueling your brain frequently, this can stand in the way of your possibility. The sixth thing is worry. So if you are somebody who's always thinking about the negative things, it's very hard to orient yourself toward possibility. And the seventh thing is difficulty imagining. So for anybody listening to this, if you could write that down, number one, burnout. Number two, feeling lost. Number three, already giving up. Number four, habit. Number five, having a down day or depressed or anxious. Number six, worry. And number seven, difficulty imagining. If you can write that down and ask yourself, what's my number one obstacle to possibility thinking? That's a really good start, because then you can say, I guess I need to work on this, or I guess I need to work on that, and that can get you going. Now I can go on to talk about each of those in detail, or happy to answer any other
Yeah,
questions.
I wanted to also to ask you, all these setbacks, do they come from patterns in our youth, for example, that like we are taught to? You said before something about this, but I would like to detail a little bit, because if we understand that a lot of things in our mind are just set there from so many years, we can understand that it's not our fault, and maybe we don't get to be that to feel that anxiety anymore, and if we understand also the patterns that we deal with every day, maybe it's easier for us to see our number one, as you said, to put our number one or number three um, blocking for us.
Yeah, I think adverse child experiences can definitely affect how you feel as an adult. And there's enough evidence to show that adverse child experiences can set you up for a more traumatic life later on. But it's not fixed. The thing about the self circuits, like who you are, we have 100 billion neurons and 100 trillion connections. And who you are is not fixed. Now, we tend to think, well, our personality is already formed, and our thoughts are formed, and our potential has already been decided. But studies, for example, with psychedelics have shown that they can change the self circuitry, and you can become a different person. Now, you don't need that in order to do that. Certain kinds of meditation can help you get there, or just contemplation by asking yourself, how can I operate as someone different? One technique that I've coined the term psychological Halloweenism, um, based on a study that showed that if you are trying to solve a creative problem, if you imagine that you are a rigid librarian versus an eccentric poet, you are much less likely to solve that problem statistically, because that's your identity that you've taken on. But if I suddenly said, try to solve that problem, but take on the identity of an eccentric poet, studies show that you are more likely to solve that problem creatively, which is sort of interesting because it means that it's not we who are in our way. It's that we are fixed to a certain kind of identity that we believed we are. So if somewhere inside of you say, yeah, I'd like to be on a board, but I don't know if I can actually be there, I would recommend you change that to, I want to strive toward my greatest possibility, which is to be on a board, to run a company, to make a certain amount of money, to have a certain level of comfort. And I think the more we think like that, as opposed to relying on the default self, the more the self circuits will begin to change. So, my challenge to you would be, if you had to change two to three things about yourself, what might you actually change? There's a video that I've seen of Lady Gaga, which I think was very instructional, where she came
Mhm.
to a point in her career where she said, "I don't want to sing anymore." And so, she is a great singer, and she had a very successful career. So why did she not want to sing? And what she said was she was beginning to do things that she didn't like to do. She had to sell perfume. She didn't want to do that. She had to take selfies. She said she had more to offer the world than that. It was superficial. She had to sell, she didn't like selling perfumes. She didn't want to take selfies. She didn't want to make people money at the expense of her creativity. And then she said, then I knew what I had to do. I had to start saying no. So when people said, "Oh, we've got this new perfume to sell," I said, "No, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to take these selfies." And she said, the moment I started to say no, I could go home and look in the mirror, and I would say to myself, "You, I can sleep with, because you have integrity." And the message there is every one of us has one thing in our lives that I think we can say no to. And I would ask you to ask yourself, what can you say no to? Can you say no to an appointment replacing your workout time? Can you say no to work intruding upon your personal time? Is there something that you can say no to so that you respect yourself more? Because that's really what matters in the world. If you can respect yourself and you feel like you are the authority of your own life, you're much more likely to get to where you need to get to.
So, as I understand, actually, the brain works for us or against us. That's up to us, because every time we do something or we think of something, our brain tries to make us happy. Even if happiness for him, he doesn't understand good or bad. So, actually, if we think about us that we are not worthy of being in a board, our brain will start working towards that goal. He finds it as a goal, right?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
it matters. What you're saying is that the brain is going to navigate. If you if your possibility brain is on, then your brain will keep on trying to calculate ways for you to get there. If you say to your brain, "I don't think I'm going to be able to do it," your brain says, "Thank you, good night, I'm going to sleep." It says, "I'm not going to try to get you there," like, because apparently you can't get there.
Or he will sabotage you, actually. He will start not taking you there because this is what you want, right? So
Right.
it goes both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something we all have to be really careful about, how we message, what our self-talk is, and how we manage these different situations.
But this is why there are so many people, and now maybe I will be a bit mean, but there are some, and some, by some I mean a lot of people, that this possibility thinking for them, it's overrated actually, and they really think they can rule the world. They actually get in top positions, but their capabilities are not what they should be, only because they sell themselves to the world that they can be whatever they want to be. They actually get there. And I don't know if this is enough, how can we manage this in order for them not to be, I mean, not only them to be there, but also the people that once they get there, they actually will do or will change something in that company. Let's say we are talking about boards.
Well, I think those people are at risk of what we call imposter syndrome, which is
Yes.
which is where internally you were not you're not really qualified to do what this job is. And even though you have the sales talk about yourself, internally you know that this is not something that you can do. And so they can actually bring an organization down. So studies have shown that people who are in those positions start to freak out about the fact that someone's going to find out about what they're doing. And so they'll do as many things that are destructive to sabotage the
Mhm.
organization as possible. So the first thing I would do is keep an eye out for someone who you think is sabotaging the organization, because their imposter syndrome is going to make them feel that way.
So all of them will have this imposter syndrome, because
No,
I find I meet people that don't seem to have this. Actually, they really start believing in what they are selling to their mind.
no, I don't think. I mean, I don't think all. I don't think we can say
Mhm.
all to any question, because different people are different. But I think if you're saying there are an unfortunate number of people who have positions who don't deserve it, I think yes. I think if that becomes a habit, it actually feels like unfairness, which is a cause of burnout. And a lot of
Okay.
people, a lot of people a lot of women who are trying to get to board positions may be discouraged by that. And they may
Mm-hmm.
say, well, they gave this position to that person, they don't even deserve it. That said, I have worked with organizations who have increased the number of women so they could have 50-50. And the
Yeah.
women who are in the organization asked me to work with them because they said they're hiring all kinds of women who are not qualified to actually do this job. And they're giving us a bad name because they were an incredible group of women who were very, very qualified. So I think that the idea around women reflecting on their own predispositions is important, but I do think that that in a situation like where you are, like where there's all people who don't deserve something, you have to still stay committed to your own possibility, because thinking about their possibilities will make you an activist about their possibilities,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not necessarily going to get you where you need to get to. So my recommendation would be, if there's something obviously unfair, of course call it out. But if it's something that's subtle, and don't get distracted by it so that you don't stay on your own path to be able to get there.
So focus on our own path, not on the others. So okay. I'm asking because I talk to a lot of people pointing out these kind of examples, and I wanted to respond to them in a very official way. So,
Sure.
ladies, stick to your own path and to your own possibility. So I think this is the solution. We talked, Srini, about patterns a few minutes ago, and I want to ask you, why do they persist in our brain? What makes them stick there in our brain?
So neurons that wire together, that fire together, wire together, which means that when you have a pattern, there is a physiologic process that happens, that's called long-term potentiation, or LTP, and so that fixes that particular circuit in your brain. But it doesn't mean that you cannot have new circuits, and it doesn't mean that you cannot change what that circuit is. For example, if you take somebody with alcoholism, someone who has a problem with alcohol has a habitual behavior. But AA, for example, has shown that that behavior can change once they address that habit in a much deeper way. So, in the same way that someone with an addiction can reverse that addiction, we can change these stress related patterns in our brains to allow ourselves to reach our goals more effectively. The thing about stress and anxiety, which was the second factor I mentioned,
Yes.
is that so when the so what it's debatable what anxiety is in the brain. The most recent theory by Lisa Feldman Barrett is that the brain is constantly creating prediction circuits about what's going to happen. Now, if someone's sensitive to anxiety, they're always going to be predicting the worst. Like, I'm never going to get the board position. I'm not going to have a good day. I won't be able to manage my work life and my home life. I think people have so much anxiety that I think is unrealistic. And at this point, I think, Alina, it would be great to show the video just
Yes.
to illustrate what is so unrealistic about our expectations. And then when you come back, I'll talk to you a little bit more about how we can manage that fear and anxiety when we're caught in these positions.
Sounds like a plan. I like plans, so I will ask my colleague to run the video now. Thank you.
I don't think women can have it all. I just don't think so. We pretend we have it all. We pretend we can have it all. My husband and I married for 34 years, and we have 2 daughters. And every day you have to make a decision on whether you are going to be a wife or a mother. In fact, many times during the day, you have to make those decisions. And you have to co-opt a lot of people to help you. We co-opted our families to help us. We plan our lives meticulously so we can be decent parents. But if you ask our daughters, I'm not sure they will say that I've been a good mom. I'm not sure. And I try all kinds of coping mechanisms. I mean, I'll tell you a story that happened when my daughter went to Catholic school, Convent of Sacred Heart. And every Wednesday morning, they have class coffee with mothers. Class coffee with mothers for a working woman. How is it going to work? How am I going to take off 9 o'clock on Wednesday mornings to go for a class coffee? So I miss most class coffees. My daughter would come home and she'll say, list of all the mothers that were there, and you were not their mom. First few times, I would die with guilt. But I developed coping mechanisms. I called the school and I said, give me a list of mothers who were not there. So when she came home in the evening, she'd say, you were not there, you were not there. I said, Mrs. Rag wasn't there, Mrs. So-and-so wasn't there, so I'm not the only bad mother. You have to cope because you die with guilt. You just die with guilt. My observation, David, is that the biological clock and the career clock are in total conflict with each other. Total, complete conflict. When you have to have kids, you have to build your career. Just as you're rising to middle management, your kids need you because they're teenagers, they need you for the teenage years. And that's the time your husband becomes a teenager too. So he needs you. Sorry. They need you too. So what do? And as you grow even more, your parents need you because they're aging. So we're screwed. I mean, we cannot have it all. But you know what? Coping mechanisms. Train people at work. Train your family to be your extended family. When I'm in PepsiCo, I travel a lot, and when my kids were tiny, especially my second one, we had strict rules on playing Nintendo. She'd call the office. She didn't care whether I was in China or Japan or India, wherever. She'd call the office. The receptionist would pick up the phone. Can I speak to my mommy? Everybody knows if somebody says, can I speak to mommy, it's my daughter. So she'd say, yes, Tara, what can I do for you? I want to play Nintendo. And the receptionist has a set of questions. Have you finished your homework? You see, I say this because that's what it takes. She goes through the questions and she says, okay, you can play Nintendo half an hour. But she leaves me a message. Tara called at 5. This is what the sequence of questions I went through. I've given her permission. So it's seamless parenting. But if you don't do that, I'm serious. If you don't develop mechanisms with your secretaries, with the extended office, with everybody around you, it cannot work. It can't. Motherhood, stay-at-home mothering was a full-time job. Being a CEO of a company is 3 full-time jobs rolled into one. How can you do justice to all? You can't. The person that hurts the most with this whole thing is your spouse. There's no question about it. Raj always says, you know what, your list is PepsiCo, your 2 kids, our 2 kids, your mom, and then the bottom of the list is me. There are 2 ways to look at it. You should be happy you're on the list. So don't complain. Just don't complain. He is on the list, very much on the list. But,
I just think that's such a wonderful video for a CEO of PepsiCo to be illustrating that nobody can do it all. It's impossible. And we get so anxious when we can't be, so many people have said to me, I can't be the perfect mother, I can't be on a board, I can't be a CEO. Nobody knows how to do this perfectly. So when you're feeling anxious or fearful, I would recommend the first thing is remind yourself that the idea is to strive for excellence, to have a better and better balance in your life, but not to believe that there's somebody in the world who knows how to do this perfectly, because nobody actually knows that. The second thing is there's a technique that I teach people, which is defined by the mnemonic CIRCA, CIRCA. And I'll tell you what each thing is, and you can write this down as I mentioned each thing, and then I'll explain them in detail. So when your brain gets overwhelmed with anxiety, there's a part of your brain called the amygdala that starts to really activate. And this anxiety center is connected to your thinking brain. And as a result, you can't really think clearly. It's difficult to do anything. And most of us just cope with it. We deal with it, and then we go home. It's like, focus, and we pass out at the end of the day. But what I would suggest you do is actually think a little bit more about this 5-step process. So the first C is chunking. It's and chunking is about breaking things. So what chunking is about is essentially, if you suddenly realize you get an email and there's 70 things to do, you just break it down into little pieces, rather than letting your brain stay overwhelmed by everything you have to do. The other thing you can do with chunking is prioritizing, ruthless prioritizing. And the third thing you can do is delegating. So if you tell yourself, for example, Jeff Bezos talks about the way in which he uses his day. And one thing he says is, I don't do things that require a lot of thought at the end of the day, because by then I don't even really have my maximum brain power. If it's going to be important, it has to be right at the beginning of the day when I have the energy. So chunking is about breaking things down over time. It's about prioritizing. It's about delegating. And it's about matching the task to the amount of energy that you have. Then the I is for ignore mental chatter. And ignore mental chatter is basically mindfulness. So if you practice this with me, it's just basically closing your eyes, placing your attention on your breath, and just focusing on every inspiration and exhalation. And if your mind wanders, you bring your attention back to your breath. Now, some people could say, well, what is this? It sounds ridiculous. Well, studies have shown that this decreases activation of the amygdala, and it may even help you live longer. So, Elizabeth Blackburn, who's a Nobel Prize winner, has done some preliminary studies that show that in our chromosomes at the end, at the tips, there's a little piece called the telomere. And as we get older, the telomere gets shorter and shorter. But when you practice mindfulness regularly, the telomere actually is the shortening is prevented. So you might live longer. So, mindfulness, there's a lot of evidence to show that it can be really helpful. Then the R is reality check, which is in self-talk is this too shall pass. You get the worst news in the world, say to yourself, this too shall pass. This is going to pass. It always passes. You got to this point in your life having dealt with so many challenges. So those challenges pass, and then you move on to the next one. Then the second C is control check, which is what are the things I can control? What can I not control? And how can I not occupy my brain unnecessarily with worry when I'm not going to do anything about something? So, a lot of people feel like they have to worry. And we can go into worry as well a little bit more, but they feel if they don't worry, something bad's going to happen. Well, something bad
Or
happens.
they don't care. If I don't worry, I don't care.
Right. But the problem with worrying is that it's an uncomfortable state, firstly. Secondly, a lot of people then start worrying about worrying, which is even worse for your blood pressure. It's not good for your heart. And so I always say to people, if you want to be miserable, I can't argue with you. There are enough things going on in the world to occupy all your attentional units to be miserable. It's we who have to decide how can I make myself feel happier by paying attention to only so much of the news, but spending the rest of my time in the sense of possibility, spending the rest of my time with my eye on my goal. So control check is let go of the things that you can't control. Because sometimes people will get worried about a relationship that didn't work out or an argument that they had. It actually helps to embody that. Write it on a piece of paper and just throw it away. And once you have performed that physical action, which is an embodiment of that emotion, it can actually relieve you. And then the last fact is attention shift, which is rather than putting our attention in the problem over and over again, shift your attention to the solution. Instead of saying, well, it's such a difficult problem getting onto a board. It's such a difficult problem knowing how to beat this. Ask yourself, well, how do I get onto the board? If there is one woman, mathematically speaking, if there is one woman in the world who is a board member, then it is possible for a woman to be on the board. It's not easy, it's not likely, but it is possible. So live in that possibility. Ask yourself, what allowed that woman to get there? There was a study looking at women in Australia, looking at what allowed certain of them to break through the glass ceiling. And there were two interesting findings in that study. One is the woman who had broken through the glass ceiling said they just complained so much about the inequities that eventually people felt guilty and they were like, well, I guess we're gonna push you up. So they did that. So that was one factor. But the second was that it was not the woman who paid attention to things that were external or who paid attention only to relationships. It was the women who spent time with themselves who could access that full power.
Mm-hmm.
The self circuit in the brain only turns on when you stop focusing. If you're going through your whole day making breakfast for your kids, getting up, jumping out of bed, or even if you don't have kids, just getting up and going through your routine, and then going through the day at work, then coming home, taking care of the work that needs to be done, taking care of the paperwork. It, you're just focusing all the time. And my last book, which was Tinker Dabble, Doodle, Try, Unlock the Power of the Unfocused Mind, I talked about the fact that to turn the self circuit on, this default mode network, we really have to create periods of unfocus in our day. And the idea there is so with the meditation, by the way, Brown University recommends 45 minutes every morning. The moment I say that to people, they gasp. They're like, I don't have 45 minutes.
I don't have 45 minutes.
Well, you do. You have as many minutes as you want. You can make that choice if you believe it's going to be good for you. Some people recommend 20 minutes twice a day. For these breaks, I'm recommending anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes, where you focus, then you unfocus, and you focus, and you unfocus. And when you're unfocusing, you are refueling your brain, right? I mean, you wouldn't take your car and drive all across Europe without filling gas,
True.
and then blame the car for not being able to get you there. You're like, I can't believe this car is so ridiculous. It can't go without gas. Well, your brain is the same. Your brain also needs frequent refueling. And so there are a lot of different ways you can achieve this. There's one way that's called positive constructive daydreaming, which means for 15 to 20 minutes, you don't just sit at your desk. You've got to be doing something low key. And then you set aside those 20 minutes. You do something like knitting or gardening or walking. And then you let your mind flow into anything that pleases you, running through the woods with your dogs, or um, just lying on a yacht, lying on the beach. And what you find is that when you go out of this focus mode, the default mode network starts to activate, and then the puzzle pieces come together. You know how sometimes people say they have their best ideas in the shower? Well, it's because they're not focusing, and the default mode network is coming on. But positive constructive daydreaming, possibility thinking, napping, 5 to 15 minutes of napping can give you 1 to 3 hours of clarity. The problem with napping is that if it starts to disrupt your sleep, you don't want to do that because you don't want to have cardiac problems as a result of that. Doodling on a piece of paper, Jackie Andrade and her colleagues found that it improves memory by 29%. A more recent study showed that if you're scribbling on a piece of paper while you're on a call, to remember it better, you probably should be scribbling something related to the theme of what's being talked about. But these are some of the ways in which we can do this. When you decide, there is a Circa app that's a free download. So you can download that app and you can actually tell yourself, I'm going to Circa every morning. I'm going to Circa once a week on Monday mornings. I'm going to Circa just before I'm tense. This will really help you manage that anxiety. But those are some of the ways in which I talk to people about managing anxiety. It's firstly to use Circa, but secondly, to make sure that you enhance your own intelligence and yourself by creating these unfocused times in your day.
Yes, for me it makes really, really sense, because even if I do it consciously, or now I'm doing it consciously, but at the beginning, my brain just said, stop, we need a break, and I couldn't work. So he actually taught me how to take these waves of working and then relaxing. While you are talking, I saw you mentioning many times about anxiety. And I wonder, maybe it's not the idea, but this popped into my mind about the social brain, in the idea of that we have so many images about ourselves. The one that we think we have, the one that people see about us, and the one that's ideal. And I wonder, I'm disappearing. And I wonder how this actually affects our way in our acceding to board positions, how people think about us, and how we think they think about us. This is the most tricky part, and I think this kind of ideas actually gives us anxiety and then fear that I would like to come back and talk about.
Well, my favorite definition of leadership is a definition by Warren Bennis, which is becoming a leader is synonymous with becoming yourself. It's precisely that difficult, but also that simple. So if you think about the becoming yourself, there is a difference between who you are and how others perceive you. I
Mm-hmm.
recommend not really thinking just about, well, how do I change to be so that they perceive who I am? Because then you'll be changing yourself all the time to any new person that's in your life. Rather, I would recommend a process called positive disintegration. Now, positive disintegration was discovered by a Polish psychiatrist and psychologist whose name was Kazimierz Dabrowski. And what he found was that in gifted students, they are constantly disintegrating, basically saying, I'm throwing away this whole life in the way that it is, but then positively reintegrating. And what he said was people who positively disintegrate go through different stages. So most of the world, 70% of the world, is at the bottom layer of this pyramid. And the bottom layer is they eat, they sleep, they reproduce, they socialize. They just live life as if it's the same thing day in and day out.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get to the next level where you know something is a bit wrong, something's a little bit off, but you don't really want to face it. At the third level, you positively disintegrate. And what that means is you tell yourself, my life does not reflect what my values are. I need to go back and look at my values. If you value power, if you value autonomy, whatever it is you value, it needs to be part of your life. In On the fourth level, you're basically living most of your life according to your values. And at the highest level, every day that you get up, it's only about your values. Now, in order for you to then say, well, if somebody else sees me a different way, how do I change myself so they see who I am? Ask yourself, what are my values? Right? What are the things I care about, and how do I communicate my values? Like if I value punctuality, if I value time, if I value this beauty around me, am I living my life according to my own values? So there, I would say that it's much more important to be able to live your life according to your own values rather than to change yourself constantly to become something that other people think you should be.
Yes, that's true. So this way we actually get away also from fear. And I want to come back to this because fear is, I think, one of the most impactful feeling that we can have that can damage our brain. How can it impact our brain? And actually, what can we do to reverse this?
So with fear and anxiety, as I said, there are different levels at which we can do. So fear can overactivate the anxiety center, the amygdala, and because that's connected to the thinking brain, it can disrupt our thinking. And if it goes on for too long, fear can not just impact your brain, but the brain does not stop functioning at the neck. Right? It goes the rest of your body. So stress and anxiety can cause epigenetic changes that then leads to chronic disease, cancer, heart disease, stroke, and neurodegenerative disease. So, as you know, I co founded a virtual reality company where we work with corporations to be able to help them decrease stress and anxiety. And we have 3 proof of concept studies showing that this actually works. However, my long term goal is not just focusing on stress and anxiety. I came across a genetics paper in work related stress that said actually this stress is adding unnecessary chemical groups to your genes. And as a result, your genes can't really communicate with your cells. And so your cells either get bigger or they die or they start malfunctioning or they multiply. And for different people, it then leads to cancer, heart disease, stroke, and neurodegenerative disease, like Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
Excuse me. So I think when it comes to fear and stress and anxiety, know that it doesn't just impact your brain, it impacts the rest of your body as well.
True.
Secondly, with regard to how to manage this, I think a cognitive technique like circa can be really helpful to manage this fear and anxiety. But I also think we need to look a little bit more deeply. There are two people whose thoughts interest me here. One is um, the idea that Kierkegaard said that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. So take a minute and think about that. That we all say we want to be free, but the moment we have the opportunity to be free, we get dizzy. And that's what anxiety is. So we build as many challenges to keep us rooted to the ground. We build in all these extra responsibilities, all these extra duties, because we're afraid of feeling gravity-less. So part of this rise to the board position is that if you get there, you may have a freedom that intimidates you. And so you ask yourself, what is this freedom that intimidates you? Freud said, and this is not a direct quote, but it's very much what he said. He said, neurotics will complain about their illness, but if you try to take it away from them, they will hold on to it like a lioness would hold onto her cub. Well, why do people hold on to this? For a number of different reasons. From a scientific perspective, the leading theory is contrast avoidance theory, which means in life you have peak experiences, right? Doing really well, feeling, having a relationship that matters, making money. And then you also have this trough experience, somebody dying or breakup. Well, people who worry keep themselves in the miserable middle, right? They're constantly there because they don't want the drop from I'm feeling great to somebody died to I'm feeling so happy that that something bad happened in my life. And so they keep themselves in the middle. So when something bad happens, the fall is not that much. They avoid the contrast of peak experience to trough experience. My recommendation there is to counter that. Regularly build in peak experiences into your life. It's very important to be able to say, I had a great experience this week. I had a massage, or I went to a function that I really like. If you don't build these in deliberately, your mind will keep you in that miserable middle. And Brene Brown, who's an author, was talking to Oprah once, and Oprah was talking to her about what emotions frighten us the most, and she said the emotion that she thinks frightens humans the most is joy. And she said, who doesn't know this feeling of having a child, for example, and looking at them and thinking, oh my God, I don't think I've ever loved anybody this much. But the moment you have that thought, you're also afraid of losing them. And she said, everyone's afraid of joy. We're afraid of joy because we're afraid of losing that joy.
Of losing it, yeah.
Yeah. And so we keep ourselves in a very different position as a result of that.
Are there any other ways that we can manage this fear? You said a few, but maybe if we set like a toolkit for the ladies that are watching, maybe it's easier for them.
Well, there are a couple of different ways. So if we look at confidence, for example, confidence can counteract your fear, right? Because it gives you the courage to do something. Now, there are three simple techniques that we can think about to manage this, to increase our confidence so we're less afraid. The first is to label the emotion. So when you call out the emotion and you say, I'm afraid, your brain's amygdala, the anxiety center, starts to activate less. Secondly, when you are trying to avoid this fear, rather than saying, I must not get anxious, your brain will do the exact opposite if you tell it not to do something under stress. So there's a person named Daniel Wegner who studied this in great detail. In fact, even in soccer players who are scoring penalties, if they put eye tracking devices to their eyes and they say, do not kick the ball to the right, the eye goes to the right immediately, which is sort of a strange thing. But what it tells us is, rather than saying do not get anxious, you tell yourself be calm. Because telling yourself not to do something is problematic. And then the third thing is, when you speak to yourself in the second or third person and call yourself by name. So if it was Alina and she was going to give a speech and she had to try to tell herself to pep herself up, rather than saying, I'm going to crush this, she would say, Alina, you're going to crush this. Because if you say, I'm going to crush this, your brain doesn't believe it because it feels like it's anxious. If you say, Alina, you're going to crush this, it realizes your anxiety brain is only a part of your brain. There's the other part of you that is going to crush this. So those three things are another three things that I would recommend people take a look at in order to decrease their fear, to boost their confidence in those three ways.
Okay, it's this one is really interesting also for the people that are trying actually to make the public speaking that doesn't work, and they try to manage with different other techniques rather than to talk to this. all of the ideas that you gave, they look really, I mean, easy, you know, but what's not easy is to implement them. We know everything, and I'm sure that all the women that are watching us said, but I know that, but I know about anxiety. But what do we do? Because we are actually at the end of our intervention. So to sum it up, what actually can we do for us to have some action plan? Because I told you, in theory, everything sounds okay. I know it, it's easy, but how do we actually do it in order for us to get there, where we want, to get our goals and objectives?
Well, you actually have to, it has to matter to you. Like, you have to ask yourself, do I want to act on this or not? Do I want to feel less anxious? Do I want a greater sense of possibility? And do I want to change the habit of thinking that has kept me stuck for so long? If you truly want this, then you will schedule it in your calendar now. You will put a circa every Monday. You will set 20 minutes for possibility thinking twice a week. And you will allow yourself to think more deeply about what your possibilities are by making it a dedicated time. It becomes an appointment. It's
Mm-hmm.
basically, it's a date with yourself. Because if you don't spend that time with yourself and you don't put it in your calendar, it's pretty much impossible. Knowing all of this information is not going to change that. What you really need to do is make a commitment to that. So the thing I would ask you to think about deeply is, how do you make a commitment to a higher level of being, rather than self-esteem maintenance where you just keep on the same level? How do you engage in SEO, a different kind of SEO, which is self-esteem optimization? And in your life, is it not, does it not feel like it's worth it, that you can actually express a different kind of self to enjoy yourself more? I feel like all of this is not just about effort, though. There's a part of this that's about deeper contemplation. It's about saying to yourself, why am I here on earth? Like, what am I here to do? What is my fundamental nature? And for me, I think the thing I am most convinced of is that I think our fundamental nature is bliss. It is a certain kind of happiness, but it gets clouded by day to day happenings and relationships. And we believe only in what we see. But perception is very limited. I cannot hear a whistle that a dog can hear. I don't have the same powers as bats. There are a lot of things that are happening that are part of reality that my brain doesn't even know is part of reality. And that's because the senses are limited. We
Mm-hmm.
have to go internally in some kind of meditative process or virtual reality, for example, to truly help you understand, what is this magic that exists in you. There's a quote by Marianne Williamson, which I think is a. I'm going to try to pull it up, but I just think it's a really important quote for everybody to think about. And it's a quote that I always feel touched by, because I feel like most people fall prey to what this uh, to what this idea is. What she says is that we are most afraid not of our weaknesses, but I'll read the exact quote to you. The exact quote is, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And that's really the thought I want to leave you with, that it is your greatness that most frightens you. And that if we can all shine around one another, if all women can come together saying, you know what, we've got it. We've got what it takes. We want to lead, and if they want to lead, no,
True.
sometimes I find women who are ambitious will also feel guilty about wanting to just do nothing. Your true power is to let your life be what you want it to be, not what other women say it should be, not what other men say it should be. It's what you want your life to be. But I think what Marianne Williamson points out, that this greatness really intimidates us, and that playing small doesn't serve us or anyone around us, is something that I really would like people to internalize and reflect on.
Yes, it is. It is actually a very insightful quote that I will think about a few days now. It was a great discussion, Srini, and I'm really happy that we could have this talk. Hopefully, we will have another chance because this brain science and the way that our mind actually helps us or not, it's such a vast domain. You cannot stop it in 1 hour. So hopefully we can do this soon, or maybe you will come soon in Romania, and you never know. We have to meet and have the discussion face to face. Once again, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. For sure, our women that are watching us had some insightful information, and hopefully they will play again the video if they didn't write everything down. Maybe we can make a brief for them and send them via email to sum it up. So we will find solution for them to have your information. Once again, thank you very much. And also, I would like to thank all the partners that are here with us all the time. And in PWN Romania, we are very thankful for all the support that we get in order for us to do our mission to support women in advancing in women leadership. So we'll see each other in 2 more weeks. Until then, I hope you have a great week, because it's only Tuesday, so we will still have a most important time of the week. It's here. We also have somebody that is here with us, Adriana. We thank you that you are here and you are watching us. Of course, if you are watching this video after the live ends and you want to put some questions, you can put it on the comments, and for sure I will send them to Srini. And if it's something that comes back as an information, I will share them with you. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. And you have a great day, Srini, because it's only midday to you.
Thanks so much, Alina. Take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.